Hello and welcome to this edition of World Panorama, a show that keeps you up to date with all the big international news stories that unfolded this week. I'm Aishwarya Kapoor with you. Here's a look at this week's top stories in the headlines. Over 11,000 people dead from coronavirus. Center of pandemic now Europe. Italy, worst affected country in the world. UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres warns millions of people could die if virus allowed to spread unchecked. Stock markets continue to plummet amid fears of global recession. Coronavirus pandemic likely to cost the global economy $1 trillion this year. United Nations says nearly 25 million jobs could be lost worldwide. Aviation industry bears brunt of coronavirus pandemic. Worldwide revenues of up to $113 billion likely to be hit this year. Share prices fall. Airlines seek bailout. Political uncertainty in Israel continues. President tasks Netanyahu's rival Benny Gantz with forming government. Can Gantz's blue and white party break stalemate and ensure stable coalition? And Joe Biden sweeps three key primaries in Florida, Illinois and Arizona, builds nearly indomitable lead in race for Democratic presidential nomination. Bernie Sanders contemplates staying in the fight. Over 11,000 people have died from the COVID-19 respiratory illness worldwide. Nearly 250,000 patients have tested positive overall. The coronavirus outbreak was first recorded in China in December last year, but now the center of the pandemic is Europe. In Italy, the virus has killed more people than any other country. United Nations Secretary General Antonio Guterres says that millions of people could die from the new coronavirus, particularly in poor countries, if it is allowed to spread unchecked. Meanwhile, WHO has warned that young people are not immune from coronavirus and must avoid socializing and communicating it to older, more vulnerable people. More than 250,000 cases of coronavirus worldwide, with more than 10,000 deaths, and it still spreads. UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres warned on Thursday that millions of people could die from the new coronavirus, particularly in poor countries, if it is allowed to spread unchecked. He appealed for a coordinated global response to the pandemic. Guterres also appealed to a group of 20 nations to help out.
Wildfire, especially in the most vulnerable regions of the world, it would kill millions of people. As we need to immediately move away from a situation where each country is undertaking its own health strategies to one that ensures in full transparency a coordinated global response, including helping countries that are less prepared to tackle the crisis. Governments must give the strongest support to the multilateral effort to fight the virus led by the World Health Organization, whose appeals must be fully met. The health catastrophe makes clear that we are only as strong as the weakest health system. Global solidarity is not only a moral imperative, it is in everyone's interest.
China this week marked a major milestone in the battle to limit the spread, reporting no new locally transmitted coronavirus cases for the first time since the pandemic began. The Chinese Health Authority said on Friday that it received reports of 39 confirmed cases of coronavirus, and all of them were imported ones. But in other parts of the world, the situation is worse. Italy on Thursday surpassed China for the most number of deaths related to coronavirus, making it the world's deadliest center of the outbreak. A lockdown imposed on 12th of March in Italy has been extended beyond the original 25th of March end date. Nearly all Italians have been told to stay at home. Hello, this is Daniela, the nurse in Milan. We are working in a situation of total emergency. The problem is that so many of our staff are at home as they are testing positive for COVID. So that leaves a handful of us to run everything. The good thing is that there is determination when faced with the reality of what is really happening. Among other badly affected nations are Iran, which this week reported high rise in death toll. The virus has so far claimed 200 lives in the US and infected more than 14,000 people. California issued a stay-at-home order for residents. Along with New York and Washington, California is among the US states worst hit by the coronavirus. The US has also called off this year's G7 summit, which had been scheduled for June.
The most effective way to prevent infections and save lives is breaking the chains of transmission. And to do that, you must test and isolate. You cannot fight a fire blindfolded. And we cannot stop this pandemic if we don't know who is infected. We have a simple message for all countries: test, test, test.
An almost shutdown across sectors around the world continues. All gatherings, public and private functions cancelled, sports events postponed, people asked to stay at homes, schools, colleges closed, people working from homes. Meanwhile, finding a vaccine for coronavirus has become a public health priority, and pharmaceutical companies and researchers across the world are hard at work on different contenders. There are currently no vaccines or treatments for COVID-19, so patients can only receive supportive care for now. Bureau Report, Rajya Sabha TV. The aviation industry is bearing the brunt of coronavirus pandemic. Revenues are in free fall as the travel restrictions mount. Coronavirus is grounding the world's airlines. Share prices of the airlines are falling. Worldwide, revenues of up to $113 billion are likely to be hit this year. Analysts say it is a critical time for governments to help the airlines hit by coronavirus. They add that the aviation industry may not fully recover from the effects of the pandemic. Empty airports around the world as restrictions on travel continue over coronavirus pandemic. On Tuesday, Australian airline Qantas said it would cut its international capacity by around 90% until at least the end of May, which means 150 aircraft will be grounded.
Qantas's decision is disappointing but entirely understandable given the dramatic situation we're seeing in terms of the downturn in international travel and the impact that's flowing through onto domestic travel intentions as well.
It is not just this airline. Coronavirus is grounding the world's airlines. European and American carriers' share prices have declined massively. US airlines are seeking a $50 billion bailout as the industry staggers in the wake of COVID-19 pandemic. The Trump administration has already signaled a willingness to come to the aid.
Airlines are a key channel in the economy. You've got to have it, point number one. Point number two, this is more, in our view, a liquidity help, cash flow help, because, again, we see this virus problem as a matter of months, not years. And we don't see the airlines failing. But if they get into a cash crunch, we're going to try to help them.
But it's nobody's fault. And we're going to be in a position to help the airlines very much. We've told the airlines we're going to help them. They want $25 billion. Well, we're going to be helping. We're going to be backstopping the airlines. We're going to be helping them very much.
Industry analysts predict that on current trajectories, most airlines will be bankrupt by the end of May. As cash reserves run down, fleets are grounded, and what flights there are operate at much less than half full. The International Air Transport Association, a trade group, projected a possible hit to worldwide revenues of up to $113 billion this year.
And if people aren't travelling, these airlines don't have any income coming in, they have high fixed costs, and as a result, they could well have to make an awful lot of their staff redundant either for a short space of time or for even longer, depending on how long the effects of this coronavirus take to sort of shake out.
Many airline bosses cling to the hope that global passenger numbers will follow the same trajectory as in the wake of previous disruptions, such as the terrorist attacks of September 11, 2001 or the global financial crisis of 2007 to 2009. After a few months of disarray, travel patterns then reverted to normal and growth resumed. All that will happen only if the recovery is swift. However, the longer the pandemic lasts, the less certain travel patterns are to revert to normal. If more airlines start to fail, that would have knock-on effects throughout the broader aviation industry. Bureau Report, Rajya Sabha TV. As the number of confirmed coronavirus cases continue to rise, stock markets continue to plummet amid fears that the health emergency might spark a global recession. China's economy, which is the second largest on the planet and whose manufacturing and production sectors serve as a workshop to the rest of the world, has taken a severe hit because of its response to coronavirus. Global businesses are now suffering from supply chain issues, and economists fear that the coronavirus is rapidly becoming an economic pandemic. Stock markets around the world plunging. Apart from the tragic human consequences of the coronavirus epidemic, the virus has also sparked economic uncertainty that is likely to cost the global economy $1 trillion this year.
A global recession, perhaps of record dimensions, is a near certainty. The International Labour Organization has just reported that workers around the world could lose as much as $3.4 trillion in income by the end of this year. This is above all a human crisis that calls for solidarity.
Central banks around the world are waking up to the prospect that the cash crunch can beget a financial crisis as in 2008. That is why the US Federal Reserve took aggressive easing measures on Sunday. However, the actions were not enough to prevent the markets from panicking. World financial markets continue to tumble over concerns about supply chain interruptions from China and oil price uncertainty among major producers.
The crisis is there and people have lost confidence. They don't know how it will and when it will end. So that's the reason that we are witnessing fall in the capital markets every day.
The UN agency UNCTAD has warned that only few countries will be unscathed by the outbreak's financial ramifications. Describing Europe, many parts of Latin America region as vulnerable, UN says so-called least developed countries, whose economies are driven by the sale of raw materials, will not be spared either. This week, several countries including Spain, UK, New Zealand, US announced aid packages to survive the onslaught of coronavirus on their economies. US President Donald Trump signed the latest $1 trillion coronavirus aid package into law Wednesday evening, this being the second such aid package in a matter of weeks. Earlier this month, Trump signed into law $8 billion in coronavirus response package.
Americans are the strongest and most resilient people on earth. And in the coming weeks, we will all have to make changes and sacrifices, but these short-term sacrifices will produce long-term gain. And again, I've said we're learning a lot for the future, and future problems like this, or worse, it could get worse. The next 8 weeks are critical. We can learn, and we will turn a corner on this virus.
However, analysts say that despite the measures, a severe recession can no longer be avoided. And some economists are already calling for governments to introduce measures to shore up aggregate demand. UN says that nearly 25 million jobs could be lost worldwide due to the coronavirus pandemic. It says only an internationally coordinated policy response would help. Analysts also say fiscal measures are needed to save companies and banks from bankruptcy so that they can recover quickly once the pandemic is over. They say that policymakers should be considering various forms of tax relief and public guarantees to help firms borrow if necessary. Besides, measures need to be taken to prevent job losses. Bureau Report, Rajya Sabha TV. And amid all the focus on coronavirus epidemic and its consequences, there was a major political news in Israel this week. Benny Gantz, the Blue and White Party leader, was tapped on by the president to assemble a government coalition, bringing Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu closer to his ouster than he's been in 11 years. Accepting the mandate, Gantz has vowed to cobble together a coalition as soon as possible. However, a question remains whether Gantz will be able to use that backing to form a government to replace Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's. And crucially, in the middle of a health crisis of epic proportions that is gripping both Israel and the world, whether he wants to.
Israel's new parliament sworn in on Monday. Instead of normal festive gathering of the 120 parliament members, lawmakers sworn in 40 rounds of 3 each to limit public gatherings due to coronavirus outbreak. So the country got a new legislature, but still there is a bit of time to establish a government. This as no party got numbers in the third election in less than a year. Israeli president invited Benny Gantz, the leader of Blue and White Party, to form the government. This after Gantz won recommendations on Sunday from 61 legislators, a razor-thin majority in the 120-member parliament.
I hereby, as I did this moment, give you the opportunity to form a government. The law gives you, sir, 28 days starting tomorrow to work on forming a government.
The invite to Gantz was a blow to Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, who is fighting for his political life amid unprecedented political deadlock and a criminal indictment for corruption which he denies. Gantz has now 28 days to forge a government, and it remains unclear whether Gantz's centrist Blue and White Party can break the stalemate and ensure stable coalition. This because there are deep divisions within the factions that back him. President Rivlin has made clear he wants a government in place soon to help Israel beat back the pandemic.
I give you my word. I will do all in my ability to establish within a few days as broad and patriotic a government as possible.
Earlier on Sunday, Netanyahu proposed a 6-month unity government that he would lead to manage the response to the pandemic. He also offered a 4-year arrangement that would see the two leaders equally split the job of Prime Minister. However, Gantz has consistently refused to serve in any government led by someone facing criminal charges. Netanyahu was in January formally charged with bribery, fraud and breach of trust. He denies wrongdoing. His trial had been due to open on Tuesday, but Jerusalem's district court postponed it to May 24th, blaming the virus outbreak. Bureau Report, Rajya Sabha TV.
And now an update on the upcoming US presidential election. Joe Biden swept 3 key primaries on Tuesday as he built a nearly indomitable lead in the race for the Democratic presidential nomination. His resounding victories have almost eliminated a path for his rival Bernie Sanders, whose campaign is at crossroads now. While there is a lot of uncertainty about what the coming weeks will bring, given the coronavirus pandemic, what is clear is that the November presidential poll is now a 2-candidate race between Joe Biden and President Donald Trump. Trump this week formally sealed the Republican presidential nomination.
Thank you all very much.
Even as the US, like the rest of the world, finds itself in the throes of coronavirus crisis, with all the 50 US states declaring emergencies, the race for White House continues. Former Vice President Joe Biden broadened his lead in the 2020 Democratic primary on Tuesday, sweeping 3 states, Florida, Illinois and Arizona, worth 441 delegates. Biden's only other major opponent in the Democratic primary, Bernie Sanders, fell further behind with a little hope of catching up.
Our campaign has had a very good night. We've moved closer to securing the Democratic Party's nomination for president. And we're doing it by building a broad coalition that we need to win in November.
Also on Tuesday night, US President Donald Trump officially clinched the Republican Party nomination with a win in the Illinois primary. While his victory had been a foregone conclusion, Illinois delegates drove Trump over the 1,276 delegate threshold required to become the party's standard bearer. However, Tuesday's elections also underscored the uncertainty surrounding the presidential primaries amid coronavirus outbreak. Ohio, which was also due to vote on Tuesday, postponed its elections, defying a court order and closing polls. Officials in Florida, Arizona and Illinois also took additional precautions to ensure the safety of voters and poll workers, including sanitizing voting machines and offering curbside voting. The primary season appears to be heading towards suspended animation now, with multiple US states delaying their contests until June.
I wasn't any more concerned going here to vote than I am going to CVS to pick up a prescription. They have all the sanitary wipes and the hand sanitizer, and everyone's careful.
As the race for White House intensifies, much focus continues to be on coronavirus pandemic. 2020 election campaign is also being reshaped. Donald Trump is not holding his signature rallies. Both Democratic candidates Biden and Sanders are also opting to hold virtual town halls and live-streamed events. The election delays have added another layer of unpredictability to Democratic primaries that has seen months of twists and surprises. Bureau Report, Rajya Sabha TV.
And finally, amid coronavirus pandemic, concert venues and movie theatres are closing around the world. As a result, several artists are now streaming concerts live. Musicians, actors and other celebrities are also turning to social media to raise spirits and awareness about fighting the spread of coronavirus. So take a look at some videos posted to social media of celebrities performing online. As I take your leave, I'll see you next week in another edition of World Panorama. See you then. Till then, stay safe and stay healthy. Bye-bye.
Sorry. It's okay. It's all that you can say. I understand. Years gone by and still words don't come easily. Like sorry, sorry.